After our parents died in a car crash, my brother tried to steal every cent of their insurance money from me while I was grieving, but I gathered proof that destroyed him in court. I'm Daniel, 29M, and if you had told me 3 years ago that my own brother would try to gut me when I was already drowning, I wouldn't have believed you. We grew up close, or at least I thought we were. I always believed that in tragedy, family is who pulls you back to shore. But tragedy doesn't just show you who's loyal. It shows you who's willing to sink you further for their own gain. The call came late at night. My parents had been in a car crash. A truck driver who fell asleep at the wheel. The paramedic's voice on the line was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that only comes when the worst has already happened. I drove 2 hours to the hospital in a haze, clinging to hope that turned out to be pointless. They were gone before I arrived. The days after were a blur of grief. I didn't eat. I barely slept. I sat at my parents' kitchen table staring at the indentations in the wood where my dad used to drum his fingers. That house was too quiet without them. Funerals and condolences washed over me like static. Everyone else went back to their lives, but mine had been ripped out from under me. And then came the paperwork, the insurance, the policies you never think about until death makes them relevant. I didn't even know how much coverage my parents had. I only knew there were documents, lawyers, and numbers so big they didn't feel real. At that point, I was in serious debt. I'd been laid off a year earlier, and while I'd scraped by with side jobs, I was buried under loans and late fees. I hated myself for even thinking it, but part of me hoped the insurance money might finally help me climb out. Not replace my parents, never, but at least keep me from losing everything else too. That's when my brother, Ethan, stepped in. At first, he was supportive. He helped with the funeral, talked to relatives, even cracked a joke here and there to cut the tension. I thought we were united in our grief. I thought he was my anchor in the storm. But anchors can drag you under, too. Because behind the kind words, Ethan was already setting things in motion. Things I didn't know about until it was nearly too late. And when I finally realized what he was doing, I understood. My biggest backstab wasn't from some coworker, some stranger, or even a fake friend. It was from my own brother, standing in the ashes of our parents' lives. The first week after the funeral, Ethan moved with the quiet efficiency of a project manager. He built spreadsheets, color-coded tasks, and answered every relative's text before I had finished reading mine. When the florist made a mistake on the spray, he fixed it. When the pastor mispronounced our last name at the vigil, he corrected him gently, the picture of composure. People called him a rock. They called me heartbroken, which sounded kind until you realized it meant useless. I told myself I was grateful. Grief had turned my brain to fog. Bills and forms looked like hieroglyphs. So when Ethan offered to handle the administrative side, I didn't argue. He said the insurance companies needed certified death certificates, that there were timelines and claims portals and things that had to be exact. I'll be point of contact so nothing slips, he said, and I nodded. Felt like kindness. It was strategy. Little things started to stack. He created a family email address, Arlis Namistate at, and made himself the primary user for efficiency. He asked me to forward any mail to his apartment, so it doesn't get lost. He opened a P.O. box as a backup. When Aunt Marie called to check on me, she said Ethan had told her I was too fragile to deal with paperwork. I swallowed the sting. Maybe I was. Maybe letting him steer was the smart play. Debt sat on my chest like a sleeping animal. Collection calls didn't pause for mourning. They simply softened their voices. I kept telling myself the insurance would at least stop the immediate bleeding. Enough to keep my small apartment. Enough to catch up on the utilities I was juggling like knives. I didn't want to say that out loud. It sounded like I was trying to monetize my parents' deaths. But when you're drowning, you look for driftwood wherever it floats. Ethan's updates came as summaries with just enough detail to sound complete. Submitted initial claim forms, he wrote, waiting on verification. When I asked for copies, he promised to upload them later tonight. Later slid into tomorrow. Tomorrow slid into the portals being weird. He never sounded evasive. He sounded busy, competent, concerned. One afternoon I stopped by our parents' house to pick up a box of old photo albums. The mailbox was empty, which would have been normal if not for the rubber band marks on the inside wall. Fresh, like mail had just been removed. On the counter, a change of address confirmation lay under a magnet. The forwarding address was Ethan's P.O. box. I told myself it made sense. Consolidation. Streamlining. Still, something in me prickled. The first Real crack appeared in an accidental forward. An email pinged my phone from the estate address with the subject line, "Claimant Clarification." It was from a manager at the insurance company, replying to Ethan, "As discussed, we cannot designate you as sole beneficiary without the signed assignment from your brother. Please provide the waiver you referenced." The waiver I had never seen. The waiver I had never signed. My hands went cold. I read it twice, 3 times, trying to make the words mean something else. Sole beneficiary. Assignment. Waiver. I scrolled down and saw Ethan's previous message quoted back. Language about streamlining disbursement. About how Daniel is in significant financial distress and would prefer funds handled through a single account. My name used as leverage. My debt reframed as consent. When I called him, he didn't pick up. A text arrived instead. "In a meeting. Everything's fine. Don't spiral." I didn't spiral. I drove to his apartment. He wasn't home, but the building's mail alcove was unlocked. In the slotted metal grid, a fat envelope bulged out of box 214, the number on the forwarding notice. Through the glass I could read the logo on the corner. The insurance company. Beside it, another envelope with the county seal. Probate court. I stood there longer than I should have, heartbeat in my throat. The hallway smelling like old carpet and someone's takeout. There are moments when you can pretend you misunderstood, and then there are moments that slam the door on doubt. This was the latter. On the drive back, the world looked tilted. I replayed every courteous email, every helpful errand, every "let me take this off your plate." And they reshaped themselves into a map with arrows pointing one direction. Away from me. The next morning a new update arrived from Ethan. "Good news. Progress with the claim. We'll loop you in soon." The sentence was so smooth it could have been printed on a brochure. I opened a blank document and started writing down everything I knew. Dates, names, the exact phrasing in that accidental forward. Not because I wanted a fight, but because I finally understood I was already in one. And whatever came next, I wasn't going to let him narrate it for me. Once suspicion cracks open, you can't close it. You start noticing everything you ignored before. I dug through my parents' desk drawers, the ones still cluttered with pens that no longer worked and bills paid years ago. Among the papers, I found a carbon copy of the life insurance policy. Both Ethan and I were named beneficiaries, split evenly. No mention of sole claimant. No special clauses. Just black and white proof that whatever he was trying to do was not what our parents intended. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing Ethan's voice in my head, calm and confident. "Everything's fine. Don't spiral." But the email about the waiver wouldn't leave me. If he was trying to have me sign something over, how far had he already gone without me? The next morning I called the insurance company myself. I expected a polite wall of privacy regulations and scripted reassurances. Instead, the representative hesitated, then said, "Your brother told us you didn't want to be involved directly." My stomach dropped. "I never said that," I snapped. "I want every document, every note on this account." She paused, typing. "Mr. Daniel, according to our records, there's a pending request for reallocation of benefits. Sole beneficiary to Ethan, contingent on your signed consent. But we haven't received that form yet." Contingent. My word was the only lock he couldn't pick. Yet, I asked her to email me copies of everything. By the time I hung up, I was shaking with both fury and a strange, steady relief. He hadn't gotten away with it. Not yet. But Ethan wasn't slowing down. Later that week, I got a text from him out of the blue. "We need to meet. There are papers for you to sign, just formalities. No details. No attachments. Just that vague command, like he was doing me a favor by including me at all." I agreed. Not because I trusted him, but because I needed to see exactly how far he'd go. We met at a cafe near downtown Neutral Ground. Ethan arrived early, dressed sharp, folder in hand like he was going to a business pitch. He hugged me too quickly, too tight, like a salesman sealing a deal before it started. He slid the folder across the table. "These are just standard forms," he said. "It'll speed everything up. Otherwise the insurance might hold the payout for months." Inside were printed pages with signature lines highlighted in yellow. Legal jargon filled the paragraphs, but one sentence leapt out at me like it was written in fire. "I, Daniel, hereby assign all rights and claims under the policy to Ethan." He kept talking as I stared at it, his tone smooth, reassuring. "It's easier this way. You don't want to deal with collectors hassling you while you're grieving. Let me manage it. You'll still benefit, of course. I'll handle distributions." Distributions. Like I was a shareholder in my own parents' death. waiting for dividends at my brother's mercy. I closed the folder. I need time, I said. He frowned just for a second, then smoothed eye. The lawyer I hired wasn't flashy. Mr. Keller was in his 60s, with thinning gray hair and glasses that slid down his nose. He listened more than he spoke, which unnerved me at first. When I laid out the folder Ethan had given me, Keller barely reacted. He just read page after page, lips pressed into a thin line. Finally, he set the papers down. This isn't just shady. It's fraudulent. If you'd signed this, your brother would have been positioned as the sole heir to the insurance. You'd have to sue him to get anything back. Hearing it out loud made my chest tighten. So what do I do? Nothing rash, Keller said. Keep everything. Don't sign a thing. And if he presses, let me know. We'll handle it formally. It was solid advice, but Ethan didn't play fair, and he didn't play slow. Within days, my phone started buzzing with relatives. My aunt called, furious. Ethan says you're blocking the insurance because you want to gamble the money away on your debts. My uncle chimed in with his own version. He says you don't care about family, only yourself. The script was obvious. Paint me as unstable, greedy, reckless. The image of a brother too incompetent to be trusted, while Ethan was the reasonable, reliable one. And it worked. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years suddenly messaged me, siding with him. Some relatives stopped replying to me altogether. At family gatherings I didn't attend, Ethan played the martyr, the responsible son cleaning up the mess while his broken brother made trouble. It wasn't just gossip. One afternoon, I got a knock at my door. A courier handed me a thick envelope, a petition Ethan had filed in probate court. He was officially requesting to be named the sole administrator of our parents' estate, citing my debt issues as evidence I was unfit to manage the funds. I felt sick. It wasn't just a scheme anymore, it was a legal battle. I called Keller in a panic, but he was calm. This is exactly why you came to me. Let him play his hand. Courts like evidence, not stories. And you have evidence. So I doubled down. I gathered every email, every text, every update Ethan had sent. I saved screenshots of his slip-ups, including the insurance rep's accidental forward. I kept a record of every relative he'd poisoned against me. And as I built that paper trail, one thing became clear. Ethan wasn't just backstabbing me. He was betting on me breaking. He thought my debt, my grief, my guilt would crush me enough to sign anything just to make the pressure stop. But what he didn't realize was that grief had burned something out of me. I was done being passive. I was done letting other people tell my story. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting. I was preparing. And the day we stood across from each other in court, I would make sure he wasn't the only one with a script. The probate courtroom smelled faintly of old paper and polished wood, the kind of place where truth is supposed to have weight. Ethan was already there when I walked in, sitting straight-backed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He looked every bit the grieving, responsible son. When our eyes met, he smiled, small, polite, but smug enough to curdle my stomach. He had supporters too. A few aunts and cousins sat on his side, nodding at him with sympathetic smiles. On my side, just me and Mr. Keller, who carried nothing but a slim folder. I felt naked. The judge entered, and Ethan's performance began. His lawyer painted him as the rock of the family, the only stable one after our parents' tragic deaths. I was described as financially unstable, emotionally compromised, and unable to responsibly handle large sums. Ethan bowed his head at the right moments, even dabbed at his eyes once. It was a show rehearsed down to the tears. When the judge asked if I wanted to respond, my mouth went dry. I glanced at Keller, who gave me a single nod. So I told the truth. I'm not perfect, I said, voice steadier than I felt. I've struggled with debt. But that doesn't erase the fact that my parents made us equal beneficiaries. And my brother has been trying to erase me from that picture. Ethan's lawyer scoffed. Do you have evidence of these claims? That was Keller's cue. He stood and opened his slim folder. Actually, Your Honor, we do. One by one, he handed over the documents. The email chain with the insurance company, showing Ethan trying to designate himself as sole beneficiary. The copy of the waiver Ethan had tried to push on me. The text messages urging me to sign formalities. Each piece was small, but together they drew a map of deception. The judge leaned forward, scanning the papers. Ethan's confident mask faltered for the first time. He shifted in his seat, jaw tight. His lawyer objected, tried to call it misunderstanding. But the damage was done. The judge's words were clipped but sharp. I see no basis to remove Daniel as a beneficiary. Furthermore, any attempt to reallocate funds without mutual consent is inappropriate. It wasn't a final victory. The process was ongoing. But in that moment, Ethan's performance cracked. The script he'd written, the story he'd spun for our family, had unraveled under the weight of proof. When the session ended, Ethan brushed past me without a word. But I caught the look in his eyes. Not grief, not brotherhood. Pure, unfiltered rage. I realized then the fight wasn't over. If anything, it had just escalated. Because men like Ethan don't accept losing. They double down. And I needed to be ready for the next move. Losing ground in court didn't slow Ethan down. It lit a fire under him. Within a week, he'd pivoted to a new tactic. Character assassination. Relatives who had been neutral suddenly avoided me. An aunt whispered that Ethan told her I'd forged documents to smear him. A cousin posted a cryptic Facebook status about leeches who exploit tragedy. Even an old family friend called to say, Daniel, if you need gambling support, there are programs. Don't let it ruin your life. Gambling. That was Ethan's new story. He'd taken the kernel of truth, that I had debt, and inflated it into a narrative where I was a reckless addict who would blow through any money that touched my hands. And people believed him, because scandal is always easier to swallow than nuance. Meanwhile, collection agencies hounded me daily. Ethan knew that, too. He knew pressure points, knew how to make me look exactly like the man he described. Some nights I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if the fight was worth it. If maybe I should just walk away, let him have it all and start over. But then I'd picture my parents. I remembered their policy documents in the drawer, both our names written in neat black ink. They had chosen fairness, equal share. It wasn't about money. It was about respect for what they'd left behind. And Ethan was spitting on that. So I pushed forward. Keller advised patience, but I wanted something stronger. I dug deeper into Ethan's trail, calling the insurance company weekly for updates, asking for every log, every interaction. That's when I learned something critical. Ethan hadn't just requested reallocation of the funds. He had also opened a separate account and tried to have the payout wired directly to him, bypassing probate entirely. When the insurance rep told me, she sounded uneasy. It raised red flags, Mr. Daniel. We froze the transfer request pending verification. But he was very insistent. That phrase, very insistent, rang in my ears. Ethan had been so sure he'd win that he'd already built the pipeline for the money to flow into his pocket. I forwarded everything to Keller, who finally smiled for the first time in weeks. This is it, he said. This isn't just manipulation. It's attempted fraud. But Ethan wasn't finished. 2 nights later, my car tires were slashed. The next morning, I found my mailbox pried open, papers missing. Nothing was proven, no cameras, no witnesses, but I didn't need a detective to guess who was behind it. Ethan wasn't just fighting for money anymore. He was fighting to destroy me. And if he wanted war, then war is exactly what he was going to get. When you fight with someone like Ethan, the hardest part isn't proving the truth. It's getting people to believe it. He was charming, polished, the kind of man who could sell lies with a straight face. I was the struggling brother with debt and hollow eyes from too many sleepless nights. On paper, I looked like the problem. But facts don't care about charm. And I finally had facts Ethan couldn't spin. Keller had subpoenaed records from the insurance company. What came back was a goldmine. Login histories, transfer requests, internal notes where employees flagged Ethan's behavior as suspicious. There it was in black and white. His repeated attempts to reroute the payout solely to himself. His fabricated claim that I had waived my rights. Even timestamps showing he logged into the estate account using credentials he never told me existed. Keller prepped me for the next hearing. This is where it turns. Stay calm. Let the paper speak. The courtroom was packed tighter than last time. Family members filled the benches, gossip buzzing like flies. Ethan walked in with his lawyer, still confident, though the strain showed at the edges now. His suit looked sharper than mine, but his smile was tighter. The proceedings started with Ethan's lawyer spinning the same narrative. I was unstable, irresponsible, and blocking what was best for the estate. But then Keller stood, voice steady, and began laying out the evidence piece by piece. First the emails, then the fake waiver, then the transfer request logs with Ethan's digital fingerprints all over them. Each document hit like a hammer, building a rhythm of deceit too heavy to ignore. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Ethan's lawyer tried to object, tried to spin it as clerical errors. But the judge's patience was running thin. Finally, Keller dropped the bomb. The internal note from an insurance rep. It read, Ethan insisted on reallocation despite lack of consent. Advised this appeared fraudulent. The word fraudulent echoed in the courtroom like a gunshot. Ethan's face drained of color. For once, he didn't have a smirk or a smooth excuse. He just sat there, staring at the table, jaw clenched. When the judge spoke, her tone was sharp. Mr. Ethan, these actions are not only inappropriate but border on criminal. At minimum, you will not be granted sole administration of this estate. Further investigation may be warranted. Gasps spread through the room. I saw relatives who'd sided with Ethan shift uncomfortably, their certainty unraveling. My aunt avoided my eyes. My cousin looked down at his shoes. The tide was turning. Ethan had spent months painting me as the broken one, the liability. But now everyone saw what I had known all along. He wasn't the hero. He was the predator. And I wasn't his prey anymore. The judge's ruling didn't end the war overnight, but it broke Ethan's armor. He stormed out of the courtroom before the session even adjourned. His lawyer scrambling behind him. Relatives who once whispered about me now whispered about him. Fraud, criminal, predator. The words followed him like shadows. The insurance payout was finally released. Split evenly, exactly as my parents had intended. No waivers, no loopholes, no manipulations. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to clear my debts and give me space to breathe for the first time in years. Space my parents would have wanted me to have. Ethan, on the other hand, faced consequences. The insurance company launched an internal review and flagged his attempts as potential fraud. HR at his firm caught wind of it. Apparently word travels fast when fraud investigation appears next to your name. Within a month, he was placed on leave. Within 2, he was out of a job. The brother who once painted himself as the stable, successful one was suddenly neither. Family gatherings changed. The same aunts and cousins who once parroted Ethan's lies now avoided mentioning him at all. A few offered me awkward apologies. Most just shifted in their seats and pretended they hadn't chosen sides. I didn't rub it in. I didn't need to. Ethan tried once, months later, to call me. His voice on the voicemail was brittle. We need to talk. We're still brothers. I didn't call back. Because brothers don't do what he did. Brothers don't turn funerals into opportunities. Brothers don't sharpen knives when you're already bleeding. Standing outside my parents' house one last time, I looked at the peeling paint, the empty porch swing, and the life we'd both grown from. I thought about how grief shows you who people really are. For me, grief revealed strength I didn't know I had. For Ethan, it revealed greed so deep it devoured whatever love was left between us. I walked away from that house with equal parts sorrow and relief. Sorrow for the family I lost twice, once to the crash and once to betrayal. Relief because I knew, finally, that I wasn't the broken one. Ethan had tried to steal my parents' legacy. In the end, all he managed to steal was his own reputation. And I kept my dignity, my share, and a hard lesson I'd carry for the rest of my life. Sometimes blood isn't thicker than water. Sometimes it's just another stain you have to wash off.